My name is Cheryl Croucher. I'm a journalist living in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is in Treaty 6 territory. I'm going to read to you a section today from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. This is from the executive summary. It's on pages 348 to 350, and it's called Media and Reconciliation. The media has a role to play in ensuring that public information both for and about Aboriginal peoples reflects their cultural diversity and provides fair and non-discriminatory reporting on Aboriginal issues. This is consistent with the Article 16.2 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which says, states shall take effective measures to ensure that state-owned media duly reflect Indigenous cultural diversity. Canada's Broadcasting Act of 1991 sets out national broadcasting policy for all Canadian broadcasters with regard to Aboriginal peoples. The policy states the need to, quote, through its programming and employment opportunities arising out of its operations, serve the needs and interests and reflect the circumstances and aspirations of Canadian men, women, and children, including equal rights, the linguistic duality and multicultural and multiracial nature of Canadian society, and the special place of Aboriginal peoples within that society. And that is cited as section S.3.1.D.3. The Act then states a more controversial obligation that, quote, programming that reflects the Aboriginal cultures of Canada should be provided within the Canadian broadcasting system as resources become available for that purpose, end of quote. And that is cited as section S.3.1.0. A submission to the Federal Task Force on Aboriginal Languages and Cultures in 2004 pointed out deficiencies in the Broadcasting Act related to these service provisions for Aboriginal peoples. It stated, quote, the Act did not enshrine Aboriginal language broadcasting as a priority. Instead, it noted that it means that Aboriginal language programming is not recognized nor protected to the extent as English and French programming, and that the phrase "as resources become available for the purpose" has become a stumbling block for many producers and programmers, linking the availability of Aboriginal language broadcasting to the political process, end of quote. The report recommended that the Broadcasting Act be revised to address these gaps. As of 2014, these provisions of the Act remain unchanged. As Canada's national public broadcaster, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC Radio Canada, is responsible for fulfilling national broadcasting policy. For many years, it has been providing a minimum level of Aboriginal radio and television programming and news in a few specific regions, including some Aboriginal language programming, especially in northern Canada. In the Commission's view, the budget cuts to the CBC over the past decade have significantly reduced and further limited its capacity to provide Aboriginal programming and dedicated news coverage on Aboriginal issues, and to increase the number of Aboriginal people in staff and leadership positions. As of March 31st, 2014, Aboriginal people made up 1.6% of the CBC workforce, well below the demographic makeup of Aboriginal people, who represent 4.3% of the total Canadian population. The Aboriginal People's Television Network, APTN, an independent, non-profit broadcaster, has taken a leadership role since the 1990s, in part to make up for the programming and scheduling limitations of CBC Radio Canada. to provide national programming and news that reflects Aboriginal people's perspectives, concerns, and experiences. The APTN has provided an outlet for Aboriginal journalists, producers, directors, writers, artists, and musicians, and attracts a wide Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadian and international audience. As of 2014, over 75% of APTN employees were Aboriginal, and 28% of its programming was broadcast in various Aboriginal languages. In the Commission's view, the APTN is well positioned to provide media leadership to support the reconciliation process. National, public, and private broadcasters must provide comprehensive and timely information and services to Aboriginal peoples and the Canadian public. Calls to action. Call to action number 84. We call upon the federal government to restore and increase funding to the CBC Radio-Canada to enable Canada's national public broadcaster to support reconciliation and be properly reflective of the diverse cultures, languages, and perspectives of Aboriginal peoples, including, but not limited to, 1. Increasing Aboriginal programming, including Aboriginal language speakers. 2. Increasing equitable access for Aboriginal peoples to jobs, leadership positions, and professional development opportunities within the organization. And 3. Continuing to provide dedicated news coverage and online public information resources on issues of concern to Aboriginal peoples and all Canadians, including the history and legacy of residential schools and the reconciliation process. Calls to action number 85. We call upon the Aboriginal Peoples Television Network as an independent, non-profit broadcaster with programming by, for, and about Aboriginal peoples to support reconciliation, including, but not limited to, continuing to provide leadership in programming and organizational culture that reflects the diverse cultures, languages, and perspectives of Aboriginal peoples. And 2, continuing to develop media initiatives that inform and educate the Canadian public and connect Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians.